Ready to find your next job? CareerOneStop.org has you covered with free online tools and data to help you plan your career, find a training program, or nail your job search. You'll find resources to help you make the best career decision and learn about in-demand careers, salaries, resumes, job postings, and more. The website has something for every stage of your career. Find your next job on CareerOneStop.org, sponsored by the U.S. Department of Labor Employment Training Administration.
Try Good Catch Foods for 100% plant-based seafood that is truly off the hook. Saving the ocean feels good, and the taste, delicious. Go to goodcatchfoods.com to learn more or shop online.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 394. What's up, everybody? So, to everybody who participated last night in the live stream, thank you folks very much. As usual, it was an incredibly awesome time. And like I was saying last night, towards the end, I find myself looking forward to our live streaming sessions on Sunday. A lot of great conversation, a lot of good back and forth. And guess what? It's a forum where you're allowed to have your own opinions, right? Nobody's going to bust your balls about your opinions. Nobody's going to talk shit or trash you. So feel free to pop into that live stream anytime you want and join the conversation. If you have any questions about anything, I'm an open book. Whatever you guys want to talk about, we'll talk about. The Epstein case, obviously. Other things that you might want to talk about, current affairs around the world, the Middle East, what I'm eating for dinner. Whatever you guys want to talk about on those Sunday sessions, I am there and ready to go. So if you have not joined us yet, and it's something that you might be interested in, get your questions ready, and I will see you next Sunday. All right, today, what we're going to talk about is Deutsche Bank a little bit more. We're going to add a little more context to the whole entire shit show that is the financial system, and especially an outlet like Deutsche Bank, who knew the sort of scumbags they were dealing with. They knew the kind of person Jeffrey Epstein was, and they still did business with him. This isn't before anyone knew that Jeffrey Epstein was a sex offender. This is after J.P. Morgan dropped Epstein and Deutsche Bank came strolling right in for the save. What do they care if Jeffrey Epstein's a convicted sex offender? With the who's list that they already have at their bank of all the degenerates and scumbags, what the hell's another sex offender added to the rolls? So they didn't care for one second about Jeffrey Epstein's infamy or about Jeffrey Epstein abusing young girls and women. The only time they cared is when they got put on blast, when they had to pay some penalties for their behaviors. Oh, then they took note. Then it's a big deal. But leading up to that, what did they care? All about that money. It is all about the fazuls to these people. And, of course, the consolidation of power. Because if you just have the money and you don't have the influence, the people on high, well, you're not worth as much, right? If you're only bringing the money, you're not worth as much as somebody who's bringing the money and the influence. Because we know that information is way more valuable than even money to these people. So that's why I find it laughable when you have outlets like Deutsche Bank, financial institutions like Deutsche Bank, acting like they had no idea the type of scumbag vipers they were in bed with. It falls on deaf ears with me. I know it falls on deaf ears with all of you out there. And the general public as a whole is starting to get really fed up with places like Deutsche Bank and other institutions that are continuously providing financial capital to some of the scummiest people amongst us. Our article today is from Fortune.com, and this article was originally published on July 9th of 2020. Headline: Deutsche Bank eagerly took on clients dumped by J.P. Morgan Chase. Now, it's facing big fines. So again, this is from July. So we have hindsight to guide us and look back at what has been revealed now and compare it to what was known then. And I think it's always important to add as much context as we possibly can in these situations, especially when we're talking about the financials. Because it's confusing, right? To keep track of all of these financials, all of the different ties that Epstein had with banks and financiers, et cetera, there's a lot. But I think that it all comes back to Deutsche Bank. I believe that after Epstein was dropped by J.P. Morgan, Deutsche Bank was pretty much the only game left in town. So I think if there's a full forensic investigation into Jeffrey Epstein and his ties to Deutsche Bank, I believe that it will reveal a whole lot more about his wealth building and his financial patterns. Now, I would think that they're already doing that, the prosecutors. But if they're not, I think it would be a pretty good idea to start. This article was authored by Christian Berthelsen. The trio of clients that got Deutsche Bank AG in regulatory trouble this week had a shared backstory. They were all cast-offs of J.P. Morgan Chase & Company. Now, we know about J.P. Morgan, and we know about Jess Staley and his help to Jeffrey Epstein as far as building wealth and making Jeffrey Epstein a preferred client. Now, once Jess Staley leaves the company, all of a sudden, they drop Jeffrey Epstein. Now they drop him? Again, it's these little things, these little nuggets that we learn along the way that all build up, right? It's all of this circumstantial evidence that all builds up. That turns into probable cause, and then that turns into a real full-blown investigation. And there is plenty of that here when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein and his ties to the financial world. So I'd really, 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 really love to see a wide net cast over all of these people that were involved with him financially, because it is about time that these extremely rich, extremely evil people understand that they're no longer going to get away with the shit that they've been getting away with for all of these years. Deutsche Bank moved millions of dollars across the globe for convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in the past decade, and billions on behalf of international lenders Danske Bank AS and FBME Bank Limited. Along the way, the German bank missed or disregarded compliance red flags for years, New York's Department of Financial Services said Tuesday in levying $150 million in penalties. And Danske Bank is another important cog in the machine here. If you folks are bored out there and you want to dive in and do some research, I think Danske Bank is a good place to dig in. Now, I've done some of my own cursory glances into Danske Bank, and it is a quite the shadowy operation, shall we say. So if any of you out there are looking for something to dig into and you want to take a look at some pretty interesting stuff as far as the financials go, that's definitely a road to travel. J.P. Morgan's moves to offload those same clients years earlier may have helped it dodge a similar bullet. And I wonder, and again, this is me spitballing here. I don't have any evidence directly pointing to this. But was J.P. Morgan tipped off? Did somebody in the regulation department of the United States government tip them off and say, hey, look, you guys better dump Epstein. You guys better dump these guys because the hammer's coming? Again, we know that there are a lot of ties that bind these financial houses and the people who are supposed to be monitoring them. All of these different, the SEC, the Federal Exchange Commission, all of these places, all of the people that work in these places have worked on Wall Street before usually. So it's still a big old boys club, and girls club, by the way, of the so-called elite, monitoring themselves, investigating themselves, and then every now and then throwing a little bit of sacrificial blood all over the altar for the rest of us. See, look, we're doing our jobs. Meanwhile, it's obvious that they're not. The biggest U.S. bank stepped away from handling money for FBME in 2009. It distanced from the others around 2013. The same year, it undertook broad purge of higher-risk clients from its correspondent banking business. Yeah, something fishy going on there. Pretty sure that J.P. Morgan was probably tipped off that things were going to turn. And as it stated just here in the article, J.P. Morgan is the biggest banking house in the country, and their reach is far and it is wide. So it is not beyond the realm to think that these people were tipped off that something was coming down the road, and they dumped all of these high-profile clients before they could get caught up in it. Now, again, I don't have any proof of that, right? Just with all that we have learned in this case, it's very difficult for me to believe that things just happen in a vacuum. The bank had incentive to offload risky clients. J.P. Morgan's primary U.S. regulator, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, put it on notice in early 2013, faulting its due diligence process and ordering it to clean up its anti-money laundering controls. All right, so there you go. They got the heads up from the Office of the Comptroller that they were not in line with what the federal guidelines state they should be doing. So J.P. Morgan, trying to get ahead of the curve, trying to avoid a $150 million fine like Deutsche Bank got, decided to jettison these clients. And while that's all fine and well, and I get that they're in cover your ass mode and simply trying to save face, what about all of the money they moved for Epstein prior to that? What about all of the money they moved for other money launderers prior to that? They just get a pass on that? So that means we all just get a pass on the things that we have done in our past if they're criminal? I mean, for everybody, that's the new rule? Or only for the bankers? Later that year, the bank said it would spend $4 billion to shore up its compliance operations, a process that included reviewing the accounts of hundreds of clients and shedding many of them. Too little, too late. And again, do we really know that they followed through with all of that? These are the only shitbag clients you guys have, huh? Sure. I'm guessing you guys just woke up one day and you had a complete reversal of opinion, and you decided that you're going to conduct your financial business squeaky clean with nothing but good quality hard-earned money. Yeah, I'm positive that's what occurred. Deutsche Bank, whose business is regulated in New York, said this week that it has cooperated with authorities and that it regretted bringing Epstein on as a client. No, you don't. You regret getting caught, Deutsche Bank, home of the 26% car finance rate. You pieces of trash, the only thing you care about is that you got caught. Don't try and gaslight anybody. Don't try and act like you care. Don't try and act remorseful now. That's not the case. You're not remorseful because you were in bed with Epstein. You're remorseful because you got nailed. Although it acknowledged deficiencies in oversight of the FBME and Danske relationships, the bank said it found no intentional effort to facilitate unlawful activity. It declined to comment for this article. Yeah, of course it did. So since this article has been out, they got slapped with a $150 million fine the first time around, and now $100 million plus $130 million on the second go around. So we're talking $280 million. $250 million and some change. $250 million and some change, excuse me. But yeah, there's no irregularities going on here. Everything that Deutsche Bank does is on the up and up. Danske flags. Concerns about Danske Bank, Denmark's biggest bank, centered on its Estonia unit. New organizations, including the Organized Crime Corruption and Reporting Project, wrote in 2018 that the unit had helped rich Russians move nearly $250 billion from their country over the course of a decade, largely through shell corporations. So there you go, the shell corporations popping up once again, and I'm pretty sure that all of this stuff is going to be brought to light from the subpoenas that Denise George has been firing off from the Virgin Islands in her bunker. I wonder if she's getting carpal tunnel from writing up all of these subpoenas and sending them out, because she's going ham, folks. Imagine if it turns out that the Attorney General of the Virgin Islands, Denise George, upstages the SDNY and the vaunted SDNY investigators and snatches this case and gets prosecutions. That would be such an enjoyable taste of irony. The bank acknowledged later that year that many of those transactions should have been flagged as suspicious. JP Morgan stopped providing the Estonia unit access to the U.S. financial system in 2013, citing the high percentage of client accounts domiciled outside the Baltic country. Deutsche Bank continued providing banking services to Danske for another 2 years. And this is why Deutsche Bank really doesn't have a leg to stand on. Everybody else was bouncing. Everybody else was getting out of bed with people like this. But Deutsche Bank, they came in to fill the gap, right? They came in the vacuum and said, hey, look, we're okay with money launderers. We're okay with human traffickers. Come on, do business with us. Everything's great. And in fact, we're going to get you some nice IPOs to turn and burn, some good some bank underwritten IPOs, so you and your buddy Epstein can turn and burn them. $280 million is not enough fine for these people. Let's get into the billions, and how about some arrests? The Justice Department is investigating the role played by Danske's correspondent banks in the U.S., including Deutsche Bank. People familiar with the matter have said, adding that the authorities are also trying to understand J.P. Morgan's role. Yeah, you want to know J.P. Morgan's role? How about you start with Jess Staley over at Barclays? A nice long conversation over some tea and some crumpets, perhaps. Because, folks, Jess Staley knows a lot more than he's letting on. Deutsche Bank had a decades-long relationship with FBME, which is registered in Tanzania and based in Cyprus. In the 1980s, the small bank was a client of Bankers Trust, which Deutsche Bank acquired the next decade. So we know that Cyprus is a huge place for LLCs and shell corporations. We talked about that during the FinCEN files. And again, another reason why I added the FinCEN files. And we did all of that back work and leg work. Because when we get to a point like we're at now, when we're discussing the actual banks that were facilitating Jeffrey Epstein and his criminal behavior, all of the terminology doesn't come as a surprise then, right? We're all very well and comfortable with this financial story by now, considering all of the groundwork we have laid leading up to this point. By 2005, Deutsche Bank had deemed FBME high on its risk scale, and its monitoring systems were flagging suspicious transactions at a rate of more than twice a week during some years, according to the New York regulator. And that's a lot, twice a week. I mean, when I was working in the sports book and we were dealing with SARS and stuff like that, I would do maybe one every few months. 2 a week, that's a huge clip. Although Deutsche Bank admonished FBME at times over its practices and demanded more information about its clients, the German bank continued doing business with it, the regulators said. Of course they did. It's all about the money. Oh yeah, we're gonna punish you, wink wink, nudge nudge. We'll make it look like you're being punished, wink wink, nudge nudge. But in reality, just keep doing what you're doing. Our bank accounts love it. JP Morgan started doing business with FBME in the early 2000s and quickly grew frustrated with its failure to fully explain certain transactions, according to documents reviewed by Bloomberg News. The banking giant was also wary of other practices at FBME, such as offering hold mail services, in which banks allow clients to use the bank's address to limit paper trails, according to those documents. Oh yeah, that doesn't sound shady or nothing. That sounds fantastic. Oh yeah, you guys want to hide some money? Come on. Come over here, we'll use the mail here, we'll make sure everything's hidden, nobody'll ever find a dime of it. But make sure you're paying your taxes. Make sure you pay every single dollar as they squeeze you. Deutsche Bank provided banking services to FBME for 5 years after JP Morgan stopped, processing some $618 billion in all. It ended the relationship in 2014 after the U.S. Treasury labeled FBME a primary money laundering concern for its alleged work with organized crime and terror groups, effectively freezing it from the U.S. financial system. FBME has disputed those allegations. So you see the kind of people they're dealing with: organized crime, oligarchs, human traffickers, arms smugglers, arms dealers. I mean, you name it. I'm sure if Adolf Hitler and Lenin were alive, they'd have accounts at Deutsche Bank. The late Epstein, for his part, was a longtime client of JP Morgan, characterized inside the bank as a center of influence who could help it attract lucrative clients. And there, my friends, lies the problem. Epstein was afforded all of this privilege. He was afforded all of these great IPOs to turn and burn that were underwritten because he was steering others to this bank. So the question now becomes, who were these others? And are we ever going to have a full accounting of the people that were in Epstein's sphere that he directed to places like JP Morgan? All these years later, and we haven't seen it yet, so hopefully this investigation will prove to bear some fruit. Epstein stayed with the bank well after 2008, when he pleaded guilty in Florida to soliciting minors for prostitution. Epstein moved over to Deutsche Bank in 2013 after a banker who'd recently joined from JP Morgan persuaded executives to bring him aboard, according to DFS. And you see it here, right? JP Morgan and Jess Staley continued to do business with Jeffrey Epstein, and Jess Staley not only continued to do business with him on a private level, as far as, a business relationship, they were also personal friends, with Jess Staley even going down to Epstein's Island for a nice little visit. Oh, he says he brought his wife with him, so that's okay, though. These people are all sick, and the fact that Jess Staley is still in that position over at Barclays, he should really be thanking the coronavirus pandemic, because it's the only thing that has kept him in that position, in my opinion. Epstein's legal troubles mounted again in 2018. That November, the Miami Herald published a series of articles cataloging allegations from women who said they had been abused sexually by him as minors. Deutsche Bank notified Epstein in December 2018 that it would be closing his accounts. And as they say, folks, too little, too late. These financial institutions have had a long run of screwing us over. They've had a long run of nobody regulating them and nobody taking a deeper look. Well, that run is over. And hopefully with the new anti-money laundering legislation that has been passed and a newfound interest in what these banksters are really up to, I hope that moving forward, we're able to hold them accountable for their actions, not just fine them, but send some of these executives that are involved in this shit, well, I'd like to send some of these people to prison. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at Bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, folks, I will be back tomorrow, and we will pick up where we left off. Have a great night, everyone.
Social justice. It's the effect of systemic progress. It's not about this moment, it's about every moment. It's not about immediate change. It's about constant momentum. Saybrook University has been doing the work since 1971, educating inquisitive, informed, and inspired leaders to change the world for the better. Learn more at saybrook.edu.
Is eating fish healthy? Certainly not for the fish, and most definitely not for the oceans. That's the reason the Sarno brothers, founding chefs at Good Catch Foods, began perfecting 100% plant-based seafood. They wanted sustainable options that are respectful of all creatures and don't harm our oceans. Ask your grocer for Good Catch Foods like tuna and crab cakes, or shop online at goodcatchfoods.com. Then, host your own Fishless Friday and feel good about every bite.